All right. Back in Queens, Mets Phillies, NLDS Game 3, and it feels like the whole season comes down to this one.
Yeah, no doubt. Tied at 1 game apiece,
Yeah.
back at Citi Field. You can practically feel the tension, right?
It's funny. Carlos Mendoza practically predicted this. Said the crowd would be a factor. Remember those electric wins against Atlanta, Milwaukee?
Oh, man, feels like ages ago.
Yeah, but that's what makes this so important, right? I mean, Francisco Lindor said it himself. Playing at home just hits different.
He wants to harness that energy, but, keep that same intensity they had on the road.
Yeah.
Tough to do.
Yeah. And speaking of bringing the energy, Pete Alonso, first pitch home run.
Talk about setting the tone. 3 homers in 4 playoff games, that's huge.
He is absolutely on fire at the right time. Makes you wonder if the Phillies pitching can handle him.
Big question mark.
Speaking of pitching, we've got ourselves a classic matchup on our hands here. Nola versus Mania. You dove into some sports line predictions for this game, right?
Yeah, I did.
They've got that whole simulation model. What makes it so different from, other predictions?
Well, it's wild. They consider a crazy amount of data. Way beyond what we usually see. Everything. Pitching tendencies to get even the ballpark dimensions.
Wow, really?
Yeah. They even look at the individual player matchups.
All right, so give it to me straight. Model's verdict. Game 3, what's it going to be?
Well, they're pointing to a few key things. Nola's history at Citi Field. Can't ignore it.
Yeah, that's true.
Remember that complete game shutout he threw earlier this season?
Oh, man. Tough one to watch.
Dominant performance.
Yeah, but Mania had that great outing against the Phillies, too, just a couple weeks ago.
Absolutely right. And you can't forget about the home field advantage, especially with a guy like Mania who really seems to feed off that energy.
Right.
And this is where Sportsline gets super interesting.
Okay, hit me.
They're all about those subtle advantages, things that might not be obvious right away.
Like what?
Well, they're pointing to Alonso's success against Nola, for one. He's hit 5 home runs off him. Career. More than any other batter Nola's faced.
I did not know that. Hidden advantage. It's like this strategic chess match. Each player's strengths and weaknesses just magnified on this huge stage.
And here's another point the model highlighted. Potential X factor for the Phillies. Kyle Schwarber.
Oh, okay, yeah.
His postseason home run record is insane.
How many?
21.
Wow.
4th most in MLB history.
So if anyone can match Alonso, it's him.
It might be.
This is, knowing these details, it just adds a whole other layer to watching the game.
Right.
You're in on the secrets most fans don't even think about.
That's what makes these deep dives so fun, I think, going beyond just the surface level, uncovering those hidden stories that, they could actually determine the outcome of this thing.
So reading between the lines, it sounds like Sportsline saying this game could go either way.
Oh, it's definitely a nail-biter. Phillies have that momentum after, walking it off in Game 2. And you can't discount their playoff experience from last year, but Citi Field is going to be absolutely rocking tonight.
Oh, yeah. We've seen what this crowd can do.
And that's a big question, right? Can the Mets tap into that energy, home field advantage, swing the series back in their favor? Or will the Phillies silence the crowd and steal this one on the road?
Okay, so we've got these two huge forces colliding here. Mets home field advantage, the Phillies momentum. What other factors could tip the scales?
Well, looking closer at what Sportsline is saying, there are some really interesting points here. Well, for instance, they factor in how each team performs under pressure, late in games.
Oh, wow, yeah, crunch time.
Exactly. The Mets, for example, one of the best in the league in those high leverage situations, they seem to, thrive under pressure, especially at home.
Yeah, which makes sense. Those late inning rallies, the crowd's going bonkers. It's like, I don't know, the whole city's behind them.
Yeah.
Right. It's electric. But on the other hand, the Phillies, they've got this knack for come-from-behind wins. They've proven they can hang in there even when they're trailing.
Yeah, that walk-off win in Game 2, perfect example. Never gave up. Boom, Rhys Hoskins, game over. You know what's interesting about that walk-off, though? It really highlights the difference, I think, between a regular season game and a playoff game.
Oh, absolutely.
The energy, the tension, it's just amplified in the playoffs.
100%. And that's where experience can be a huge factor. The Phillies were just in the World Series last year.
Right.
They know how to handle that pressure.
So we've got the Mets who, they excel under pressure, especially at home. But then you've got the Phillies who, they seem to find a way to win even when the odds are completely stacked against them. Man, this is intense. So how does Sportsline even, begin to weigh all these different factors? That's the thing about their model. It's amazing. goes
Yeah.
way beyond the basics. Like, it digs into the nuances. For example, how each team performs against left-handed pitching versus right-handed pitching.
You're kidding. They factor that in.
Oh, yeah, totally. They don't miss a thing. And here's what's fascinating. The Mets have historically hit Nola, who's right-handed, pretty well.
Hmm.
But the Phillies, they've struggled against lefties this season,
Okay.
which plays right into Mania's hand.
Wow. Okay. That's a whole other level of analysis. You're not getting that just
Right.
watching, ESPN. So given all of these factors, is there anything that, I don't know, that stands out to you, like the biggest X factor?
It really comes back to that home field advantage for the Mets. I mean, the atmosphere at Citi Field, especially during the playoffs, it's electric. Incredibly difficult for visiting teams to deal with, especially with that crowd roaring after every strikeout.
Yeah, we've seen it rattle even like the most seasoned veterans. Remember Josh Hader last year?
Oh, yeah.
Completely lost his command. Crowd was deafening. I was there. I mean, the energy was unbelievable.
It's intense.
Well-
And if the Mets can capture that energy again, get that crowd on their side, it's like a domino effect, gives their hitters that extra confidence, and, it might just make the Phillies feel like they're playing against 8 fielders instead of 7.
It's like that old saying, right? Defense wins championships. But in this case, it might be home field advantage wins championships. But, the Phillies had a pretty solid road record in the playoffs last year, so it's not like they're, afraid to play away from Citizens Bank Park.
That's a good point. They definitely exceeded expectations on the road last year, which honestly just adds another layer to this whole thing.
Speaking of adding layers, I got to know.
Yeah.
Sportsline's prediction, what are they saying? Who wins this thing?
Well, they give a slight edge to the Mets. Just slightly.
A slight edge, huh? Hey, I'll take it. But sounds like with everything we've talked about, it really could go either way.
No doubt about it. And they emphasize that, in these types of games,
Well,
where there's just so much on the line. Yeah.
that human element, sometimes it's like more important than even the most sophisticated algorithms.
Right, totally. So for our listeners out there getting ready for this, I mean, huge Game 3. What's the biggest takeaway here?
I think it's this. Don't just watch the game. Experience it. Like, really pay attention to those subtle shifts in momentum.
Yeah.
How the crowd reacts to, every pitch, every hit.
Yeah.
Watch those individual matches we talked about, like Alonso versus Nola, and just see how it unfolds.
It's like you said before, right? Those hidden stories that
Yeah.
are kind of playing out beneath the surface.
And don't be afraid to, embrace the unpredictability of it all.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's what makes baseball, I think, so captivating. Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we'll leave our listeners with this final thought.
As you're watching Game 3, remember, you're not just watching a game. You're watching history in the making. Every pitch, every swing, every roar from that crowd, it all adds to, the story of this incredible series.
So buckle up.
This is going to be one heck of a ride. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. Be sure to check back after the game for, well, who knows, maybe even more analysis. Until then, enjoy.